he got really like his reactive and his tone got really high, like yelling, I would just shut down. And I would see my grandfather, my old school Italian grandfather.
Hello and welcome to the Weaponized Marriage Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Hewitt.
And I'm your host, Kendra Hewitt.
Today we have a very special episode. We have a couple of our favorite people here joining us today. And we decided, to break up some of the content and have our marriage therapists, Steven and Marianne Kalas. So welcome to the podcast, you guys.
Good to be here.
Hello.
Yeah. So I thought we would open and just talk about how we met, Steven and Marianne. And so Steven was a guest on Garrett White, his podcast called Date Your Wife. It was more of a
Date Your Wife experience.
Yeah. So it was like an online, weekly experience. And Steven came on there and, taught some things about marriage that just kind of blew our mind. And Kendra and I were there sitting there in awe, and we knew that one thing was for certain, that this was, the therapist for us. This was somebody that really resonated with the things that we knew that we wanted to experience as a married couple. So I called up Steven, and he said, yep, jump on my schedule next week. And, the rest is history. It was, the best investment we've ever made in our marriage is definitely the time that we've spent with Steven. And then, Kendra's also done some therapy with Marianne individually, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I think that I like to intro both Marianne and Steven as they're not your average therapist.
No.
I think that's what made us really attracted to them. And we had some not so great experiences prior to working with them. And this is kind of like, for me, a bit surreal that they're our first guests, because we wrote a list of who would we would love to interview. Mm-hmm. And I was like, there's no way we could get them on. And then here we are. So yeah. I'm excited about it. Awesome. And we've talked about Steven on the podcast a lot. Mm-hmm. My experience, I've shared some of my personal experience with Marianne's work as well. And last week, we dropped a little bit about some of the things that we are going to talk about this week. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, me too. So without further ado, if, Steven and Marianne, would you guys, introduce to the audience a little bit about, where you guys are located, some of the things that you guys do to help married couples and what you're all about?
We are both located in the therapeutic and theological hotbed of Las Vegas, Nevada. Marriage is a bit of an industry here. However, despite the image of Las Vegas, there are lots of people here doing lots of really good work and making their lives mean something.
I am in private practice at a place called Character Way Counseling in Las Vegas. And in the recent past, Marianne has joined this practice. And I do a lot of different things with a lot of different people. But in the last several years, both of us, our work has been dominated by couples. And even when we're working with individuals, it is usually like we work with the two of you. So, I'll hang out with the couples, and she's doing some individual work with Kendra. But it's really all one work, even though.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's amazing. I know it's been very valuable for us as far as, the individual work and then, coming together and working as a couple. One of the things that Kendra and I really resonated with, Steven, was when you introduced the concept of marriage as an institution, and that institution is something that is, something most married couples, I would say, struggle with. And could you speak a little bit to that, how it was introduced to us and how you describe marriage?
So here is my passionate bias. Modern people have symbols, but they no longer seem conscious in their relationship with the symbols. Marriage is a symbol. It is a vocation. It is an institution. And I find as I talk to couples, they present things to me and to us that in my heart make me say, here it is again, a modern couple who has stepped over or neglected to ask the question, what is marriage? And I'll make a joke. Like, for instance, this is an example. If you know what marriage is, then you know that you would never say, people should love me just the way I am. Because what I want to say to people who say that is, great, live that way. Just don't get married. Right? You would know not to say, but that's my business. Because if you understand what marriage is, you know that there's no such thing as your own business. These are just some almost trivial examples. Marriage is something. Mm-hmm. And if I could reduce it to one sentence, I'll quote my teacher, now gone to be with God. His name is David Snarsh. And he said simply, marriage is a people growing machine. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Don't do it unless you want to spend the rest of your life becoming who you really are.
Yeah, I love that. And I think one of the things that Kendra and I really love working with you on is the notion that marriage is like, it's something you have to reinvent every day. It's like a living organism you have to work on, like your fitness or like a business. And if you neglect it and you don't continue to nurture it, it just sort of stagnates or at worst dies. And one of the things that you describe so eloquently is that one of the things that's very essential in order for you to really work on the marriage together is you have to become the resident expert on your spouse's bullshit, is what you say. So can you talk to that? Because I love this and it's something that's really helped Kendra and I a ton, because I got a lot of bullshit, if you didn't know.
So may I suggest, I'm going to go first, but you go second, because what you're going to see it is in real time, right?
Yep.
I am, and I am becoming, because it never really stops. I am, and I am becoming. It's almost funny to say out loud. The planet's resident expert at Marianne's bullshit. Now, what do I mean by bullshit? Let's talk more precisely. I mean, there's Marianne's real self, and then there is her ego self, and that's true for every person on the planet. So by bullshit, I mean ego self. And if you want to do your job in marriage, you realize the reason she came to look for me is that she needed an expert. She needed somebody who, all else being equal, would be able to look up and go, oh, I know how to handle this. I know what this is. This is the blah, blah, blah of Marianne's ego. And when I'm on my game, which is not always, I can notice it and wait for it to be over. I can notice it and offer some ways to soothe her or stop her or hold up a mirror so that she can look at what she's saying. And she can recognize that this is her ego self churning after her, that she can pause and stop and find her real self. That's every husband's job and every wife's job. And to take pride in that job. It's not like, oh, I got to do this again. It's like, this is my job. So she'll offer one for me, I'm sure, but I'm going to offer one for her. Her personality type under duress tends to be cynical. Yeah, it is.
I have no idea what that looks like. Yeah.
I call it realistic.
She calls it realism.
Yeah, me too.
But when I feel it, see it in her, my personality, it's jarring. It's like somewhere in my heart is always like, I'll do it like comedy, like in my heart silently, this will always be my least favorite part of you. Like,
yeah.
But it's my job to see it for what it is, to wait, to hold it, to gently or sometimes firmly kind of redirect the energies and help her?
Yeah, resident expert is a really good way to put it. For you, because we are different personalities, what I discovered rather quickly in our marriage is that for whatever reason, do you remember the game Battleship?
Oh yeah.
So he might be a boat and I might be a peg. And then at other times we reverse and I'm the boat and he's the peg. And that doesn't mean we always sink each other's battleship, but rather we learn to navigate the spaces around these battleships, because you learn, as the planet's resident expert in your spouse, that you don't always need to sink the battleship to vanquish or to encounter whatever it is that's happening in the personality. And so if his least favorite part of me is my cynicism, I would have to say for him, my least favorite part would be the drama. Now, I don't mean drama as in, I get a call that he's standing on the strip, maybe in galoshes and not much else. Rather that certain things that come across our daily lives, not everything takes on the character of a Wagnerian opera.
I think she's trying to say that I can be very emotional.
And
Dramatically emotional.
But see, the thing is that we are both very emotional personalities, right? Mm-hmm. Individuals, but in personality, mine goes one way, cynicism, which I like to call realism, and his goes to deep emotion, deep drama,
which I like to call authentic.
Exactly.
Yeah, as far as like an example for Kendra and I, and you guys are using sort of like, traits of your personality, but what I also understand is like, I guess trauma patterns as well, right? You have to be a resident expert in your spouse's trauma pattern. And I know for me, like I realize one of my trauma patterns, and the reason that I have this reactivity and anger mechanism that comes out is that like, I'll hear Kendra ask me questions that sound like condescending and almost like, you should have done this and it wasn't done right or good enough. And then immediately I'll have this like spike of cortisol that will go up, and it will be like my mother, like, criticizing my father after he worked 16 hours that day, but she was with 4 boys, like totally pulling her hair out. Right. But she's like, just fucking help me and do this and that. And
I need you to do the dishes.
I need you to, yeah. And for me, like immediately I get this like cortisol response when I hear that kind of stuff. But now Kendra can kind of see like, oh, okay, well, he's just being David Hewitt right now. He just needs to like have a moment. And then he's going to be, I could put my hand on his heart. I could be like, hey babe, it's okay. You can just chill. It's good. And I know Kendra too. I mean, she's got some traumas too that I recognize. Kendra, I like to tell this story. Like Kendra's default to, I think when she's not necessarily unhealthy, but she's like overly, I guess, obsessed with safety on occasion. One of the stories I like to tell is we went to Montreal once, it was a New Year's party. We were at David Guetta, like, we're young and no kids. Like we're not doing drugs and get wasted, but we're with another couple having fun. And it's like this warehouse atmosphere. The music's bumping and we see these chicks in like, just like Vegas, right? Like the bottle girls. So they come by in their skimpy outfits and there's sparklers on these like bottles of Cristal and whatever. And Kendra's looking at these bottles with the sparklers and she's looking for like, where's the emergency exits? And like, this is a fire hazard. And where's the, where are the fire extinguishers? She's completely in a panic. So anyways, yes. So,
Brian, if I may, as you were talking, it just touched my heart. You were absolutely right, I think, to notice that we kind of zeroed in on the BS of personality type. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You were absolutely right to say, I've also got to be the planet's resident expert at losses, or trauma in Marianne's life. And obviously it's her story, so I'm not going to tell the story, but I will say this. I know her story. I know some of the darkness or forces of darkness or things that were traumatic for her. And I hear them sometimes as she's talking to me. And like you, I sometimes have the feeling of, oh my God, she's not talking to me. Right. I'm hearing her talk to her past or about her past. And maybe you could say a few words about how you know my story.
Oh, yeah, particularly because I am from New York. I speak quickly, I move quickly, I think quickly, often to my detriment. So sometimes when we're in the middle of busyness, I will have this kind of like chop, 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 chop way of speaking because I've got more whirring around in my head than I can get out of my mouth to tell him what needs to happen, what I need to do, or sometimes even to get his attention because he's already off somewhere else. And a lot of times I will be, I'm using this word, I'm using hyperbole, I don't really mean it, but he will reprimand me for my tone of voice when that's just really not even happening. I'm just kind of doing a data dump of all the stuff that needs to be done today or in this particular moment, because we don't really get a lot of time together during the day. So when I do, I usually use a funnel and I'm kind of just pouring it all into him so something will stick. And many, many times he'll come back at me and, one of the things I'll get is, don't use that tone of voice with me. And of course, what will I say? What tone of voice? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Well, yeah, actually he is. But
no, hear her. She is not making this up. Yeah, in that moment I am. I don't have any capacity to tell the difference between my adult self and my little self that had to put up with a lot of shame and contempt and is reacting to that.
And when you're talking about trauma reactions, you have trauma with a big T and you have trauma with a small t. And the way our neurobiology works is that once these get imprinted in the neural net, our brains are magnificent at many things. One of the things they perhaps are not so magnificent at doing is distinguishing between big T trauma and small t trauma, because a trauma response is a trauma response. And once that is, once it's ingrained, it could literally be, I mean, not that it would happen, but I could literally walk up to him and punch him in the face or use a tone of voice, and the reaction in his mind and in his body is exactly the same. And there's no way for me to know that were I not familiar with the trauma that's already been revealed to me.
Yeah, and I'll jump in here too, is that the example you gave of when Steven was teaching, and Marianne, I believe, was on that call too, when we first learned this concept of like reacting to the trauma from someone else that's going on, but you don't really know what that trauma is. And I think that when Ryan and I started exploring each other's and building compassion for each other's trauma and making sure that we started to have non-negotiables of like not bringing it up. So like, just like he said that his mom was who he would hear, I started to really get in touch with like the person that I would hear when he got really like his reactive and his tone got really high, like yelling. I would just shut down. And I would see my grandfather, my old school Italian grandfather, and my grandmother's response of just like basically shrinking. And just not upsetting the apple cart. Like I remember one of the biggest things I think about with my grandmother was hysterical was she used to buy a lot of like stuff on sale. She was like, a Depression era. She was born the day after the Great Depression happened. And so this was her trauma her whole life. And she never confronted it. And one of the things that I think was really amazing is that I remember her shopping and then she would hide it in crevices of the trunk. And she would open the trunk and she'd be like, hurry up, get this in the house before your grandfather sees it.
Like a drug deal.
And then like, if he ever saw it, he'd be like, Anne, why are you buying all this shit? like, and it was like, this was what I was exposed to as my role models, because I lost my dad at such a young age. I didn't have like a marriage role model that I lived with. It was more my grandmother and my grandfather's super old school marriage, and totally dysfunctional marriage in many aspects. Some were good, but a lot of them that I look back on were ones that I don't want to repeat. So when Steven introduced this concept of becoming the radical resident expert on each other's spouse, that's when Ryan and I really started to lean into being much more open about sharing and starting to confront not only our trauma, but also this thing, which I know we're going to get into, as well as like what our personality styles were, and in the form of what you both are experts in terms of the understanding of the Enneagram. And that took what we were doing in couples therapy to a whole new level, because now we started to understand each other on not just a surface level, but like a very deep level, sometimes unconscious stuff that we had not dealt with. And now we're starting to work through it together and as individuals. And I think that's when we really made a shift in the direction of where we were going with our marriage.
Yeah. So maybe Steven and Marianne, if you want to, open up that discussion about the Enneagram and how it, how it is infused in your work and why it's so powerful.
The briefest thumbnail sketch of where it comes from. I like it. Please, I'm simplifying way too much, but the joke I tell is the Enneagram is what happens when the Jesuits meet the Sufis. I'm not entirely joking. So here's this kind of more Eastern spirituality. And the Sufis believe that God has 9 attributes, 9 fundamental attributes that makes God God. Mm-hmm. The Jesuits, Christians, ran into this idea, took it home, and pretty much did this. Okay, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, what do we know? We know that God created us in God's image. Well, wouldn't it be just like God to scatter his image in 9 different directions, meaning that every human being on this planet carried one of those 9 attributes in a particular way? The Sufis called this the godlight, right? Wouldn't it be just like God to scatter his image in 9 different directions, so that the only way Steven could ever know God would be to meet Marianne and Ryan and Kendra? So right in there is this built-in community that makes literal the words of Jesus, where 2 or more would gather in my name, there I would be in your midst. Folks, of course you can pray privately to God, but the fast track of knowing God is to get into a relationship, and marriage is one particularly intense illustration of that. The Enneagram was born out of this theological, spiritual understanding, and we use it in marriage because it is uncanny. It is uncanny in its power. All human beings have an ego and an essence, a personality or false self, and an essence, which is a real self. And to understand Marianne's personality gives me a lot more choices of reacting, helping, or not being reactive, and for her to understand mine. So the Enneagram is a very, very powerful tool. If it's new to any of your listeners here today, Ennea in Greek means 9. Enneagram literally means the 9 types. And we'll send you to a website and you can look into it yourself.
Yeah, and I think that was game changer for us. And I want to go back to your original story about when we were at the David Guetta concert. And that was 2015. It was New Year's Eve, turning 2015. Okay. So 10 years ago. Yeah. And what I thought about was that we didn't have knowledge of the Enneagram and how it works into our marriage at that point, right? And the 6, I'm the number 6 is the one that matches my type. And Ryan is what's called a 3. Marianne's a 3 as well. And then Steven, you're a 4, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. And so I highly encourage you, like we'll link it in the show notes, to take this test. It does take a little bit, but it is so cool.
Is it what, 44 questions, I think, right?
144.
Oh yeah, sorry,
144.
144, right.
So, but it is such an invaluable, I think,
Tool.
tool to utilize and to really start to become more of a resident expert on your spouse. But I want to go back to the David Guetta concert, because as a 6, what you would see is that one of the things that a 6 is constantly doing is scanning their environment for danger. And I remember very clearly at that concert, Ryan was looking at me. He's like, "You literally look like you lost your dog or something. Like, what is going on with you?" And he was getting into this tone. He's like, "Why can't you just relax?" Asking all these questions that are not empowering to me, or I'm hearing through the correct filter, and I'm in my head trying to figure out what I'm scanning. And what Ryan was very accurate in explaining, I was concentrating on these bottle girls. And one of the things that was really funny is that this place was packed, as you can imagine, with a very big named DJ on New Year's Eve. And there were not enough exits. And that's all my mind could see, was that there was not enough exits. And now fast forward to starting to do this work where we're starting to understand. And Ryan most likely would not ask me those typical questions anymore of like, what's wrong with you? What are you focusing on? Why can't you be here now? He would more so now start to look at like, where is she off that's feeling unsafe for her? And he has different tools that he would use now to put me back into, for lack of better explanation, my body, of like, let's bring you back into your body so you can actually know that that's not a threat and you can be present with where you are at right now. And I think the Enneagram has just really helped us, and you've been pivotal in helping us explain that, both of you, to each other, in understanding, and created a new level of growth. It is a tool for a new level of growth in your relationship, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Oop.
Oh no.
I'm so sorry about that.
So, Steven, Marianne, can you tell us a little bit about like what are some of the common pitfalls you see with couples, and like work around, like maybe work some of the Enneagram stuff into it? Like, what are some of the common ones that you see
Do you mind?
most often?
No, go ahead.
So because of our discussion about the Enneagram, I'm going to start right off with my favorite, because I'm the guy whose lifestyle, and I offer this to others. Have you ever heard the old phrase, "You got to laugh or cry"?
Yep.
And I believe in that phrase very, very deeply, and I'd rather laugh if at all possible. So what I'm about to describe is so absurd, but it's so real. And once you see it, it's pretty damn funny. I listen to couples argue for a living. Right?
Yeah, literally.
People give me money so that I have to listen to them argue. And if you heard as many women and as many men back and forth as I have in my office, you will understand what I'm about to say. In between the words and the sentences of the push and pull is an implicit question. Now, nobody would say this out loud because it's too stupid, but I can hear it. And the question goes like this: why aren't you more like me?
God damn it.
And you see, if you said it out loud and your mate was on her toes, the answer would be, because then one of us would be unnecessary, bozo. The reason you came looking for me, the reason you thought I was hot that first day you laid eyes on me, is because something inside of you did this. Whoa, what is that? That is so not me. That is so not me.
Mm-hmm.
You know that guy on the eHarmony, we match you on the 35 scientifically proving matching blah, blah, blah. Maybe they do. But I'm here to tell you
We beg to differ.
that what turns you on, and I mean what invites sexual energy in the first early days of courtship, is not that you both like bowling. It's that you are living in the mystery of this person that is not you. Now, you get married and you tend to forget that. And this is why, and again, it's pretty funny, if you talk to a man in the first 6 months of a love affair, new marriage, he'll be like, I got to tell you about my wife. She is an organizational wizard. You've never seen the like of it. She is the can-do girl. She runs our house like a Swiss watch. Now, check in with him about year 5, 6, or 7, and he will say about the same woman, she's a controlling bitch.
Right.
And I'm like, dude, you can't do that. You can't fall in love with her because of attributes A, B, C, and then 6 years later retell the story and say to her, that's the problem. A woman will say to her girlfriends, I finally met a man who can talk about his feelings. He brings me flowers. He writes me poetry. You've never seen, girls, they really are out there, men that can talk about their feelings. Now check in with her at year 5 or 6. You lack ambition, you're not manly enough, and you're kind of a pussy.
I knew you
And
were
I'm
gonna say
like,
that.
girl, you can't do that. You can't fall in love with him with attributes A, B, C, and then rewrite the story. For me, that's the trap, is remembering that he, she is not you for a really good reason. What's the trap you want to talk about?
There's kind of two, and I'll suggest that they're both related. So, for a couple that is doing the work, I think one of the very common traps is, perhaps I'm overstating it, so feel free to rein me back in, is this kind of spiritual bypass. Right. So you're doing the inner work and you're like, oh, my husband is fill in the Enneagram type. It doesn't matter. And if you know his instinctive subtype, it's even better. And then instead of saying, oh, this is who my beloved is, you say, I know how to fix this. Yeah, you're going to be sorely, sorely disappointed. And perhaps even you will call 1-800-DIVORCE-QUICK. Like, that's I guess what I'm trying to say is a little knowledge is a dangerous thing.
Because the spiritual bypass says, I need to change.
Yeah, the spiritual bypass is, I need to know instead of saying, I need to know where my buttons are, I need to know how my trauma drags me into the world, you say, oh, well, I know his trauma. Let me go and fix that. Here, come sit on mommy's lap and we're going to fix this for you.
Right.
Dear God, no. That's the surest way to push both of you off a cliff. That is simply going to push you into more work that you perhaps might not have necessarily needed to explore. So that's kind of the first danger. I would say connected to that is sort of this complacency that, you've made it to year 5. God, that's ironic, isn't it? You've made it to year 5 and you're kind of like, yeah, we don't fight as much as we used to. And, he's agreed that I can, have my mother over every 3rd weekend and whatever. And you think, oh, this is how it's going to be for the next fill in the blank number of decades until, one of you is released to the mercy of death. That is not the work either, because that's another type of stagnation. So it's kind of like you have your house plants on the windowsill, you keep watering them, and you don't think about whether they need to be moved to a different location or snip off a dead branch. You just kind of adopt a plug and play attitude, which, and I think complacency is just generally dangerous.
That second one, I just want to say this. We talk a lot to couples about the absurdity of this. I'm going to do it as caricature. Watch. Honey, our closeness, our romance, our courtship, and great sex, it should happen naturally.
Right.
Okay. Here's what I want to say to everybody on this planet right now. The only thing you can count on in the human heart to have happen naturally is indifference.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That happens naturally. You wake up at year 5 or 8 or 11 and go, oh, I don't give a shit, right? I don't even care anymore, right? No, if you want to grow the things that marriage offers, you show up like watering the plants. You show up every day and make sure the plant is okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think for us, like that sort of 7-year itch thing really manifested itself in our marriage. And that's kind of when things went sideways for us. It sounds like that's a really common, like between year 5, 6, 7. And hearing you say that, Steven, like that polarity that initially was the attractiveness to the person eventually turns into like what you can't stand about that person.
It's so funny.
Yeah. And you almost start to look at like the grass is greener, like Marianne's saying, like, yeah, I mean, I've been trying to fix this person, but fuck them. Like they're not listening to me.
You're like, I don't have a big enough Band-Aid for this one.
Yeah. And then you just like, then you're stagnant and it's like, well, nothing's going to change. So I'm going to go do something stupid or like whatever. So I think there's a lot of marriages that are listening that are in that place. I know there is. So what are some like, I know you're not going to fix everybody's marriage in this like 30-minute podcast, right? But if there was like your most valuable piece of advice that you could give a married couple that's in that place of like indifference, they lack polarity, maybe their sex life is suffering, they're just kind of like going through the motions. Like what would you say to that couple?
So it gets funny how towards the end of this time for us to be together, I guess I'm going to kind of end where I started. I want human beings to know that marriage is a symbol and it has a purpose and a meaning. Meaning, if I can answer the question, what is marriage? I can garner strength and clarity about what I have to do. Let me give you an example. But believe it or not, marriage is not first about how you feel. Mm-hmm. And you're talking to a guy who loves to feel and loves to feel deeply.
And be dramatic about it.
And being dramatic about those feelings.
By the way, Steven's a stand-up comedian on the side too.
So I'm not discounting the joy of feelings. You're talking to the last man on earth that would do that. But even I have figured out that I am not my feelings. And just because in a given moment with my beloved, I don't really have access to a lot of happy feelings. In fact, what I'm noticing is resentment or a sense of injustice, or this is not fair, or why are you talking to me this way or treating me this way? Modern couples sometimes just assume that once I don't want to have sex with you anymore, that is to say, once I don't have hubba horny for you anymore, and I no longer have limerence, it's called limerence, the sense of in-lovedness. So if I'm not horny for you and I don't have limerence, that must be all the evidence I need to know that it's time for me to leave you or meet a firefighter or a blonde at the bar on the side, right?
Wait, you're going to meet a firefighter?
No, I'm not. It was just an example.
Steven likes firefighters.
And it would be anyway.
That's another podcast.
So we beg couples all the time to believe us when we say that 3/4 of the divorces in America are clinically unnecessary.
Wow.
What does that mean? It means you're welcome to get a divorce, but your new relationship is going to break down in exactly the same way, in exactly the same spot, until you stop confronting each other and start confronting yourself.
In the other.
Yes.
Confront yourself in the other.
In the other, yes.
Powerful. So I really appreciate your time tonight. I think that was massive value that you shared in that short time. What I want to give you the opportunity to tell our listeners is, now I know one of the things that both of you are going to start doing is actually some experiences, right? So you're going to start offering I guess, would you call it a seminar? Is it a seminar?
Workshop, seminar?
Workshop, yeah. So like a marriage couple workshop. Can you introduce that, talk about it, and let us know when it's coming up?
You'd make me happy if you went first.
Oh my gosh. So most important detail is it's coming up rather quickly, May 15th through 18th. So that's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, here in Las Vegas. So I find the irony of that just so perfect for this.
Perfect.
And it is called Only for the Brave. Loving deeply takes deep courage. And we're going to try in a very short period of time. It sounds like a long weekend, but as we've started looking at the curriculum, it feels like we don't have enough time. But we're going to look kind of at the sort of kaleidoscope of, growing great love and intimacy, following the arc of the sexual courtship, and connected to the sexual courtship is what I like to call the spiritual courtship. There is a really deep connection between sexual energy and spiritual energy. And so we're going to examine how those three things interface with each other. What I miss?
I didn't miss anything. I just forgot my cheeky little line.
Go ahead.
Sexual energy and spiritual energy are the same energy. It is no accident that at certain moments of crucial intimacy, the thing most often uttered is,
Oh God.
Oh God.
"Oh
There you
God."
go.
And you can laugh if you want, but I'm not making a joke. Who else would we cry out to than in the ecstasy of what the Jews called one flesh, and the two shall become one flesh? We're just super excited about this workshop.
And who is like the ideal married couple for this workshop? Is it couples that are only couples that are struggling, or couples that want to get better, or who would you describe? It should be.
We've talked about, that's a great question, and we've talked about this a lot. We tremble in our own humility because I guess the real answer is we don't know, and that should be up to the Spirit to lead anybody who wants to come. Having said that, we have talked a little bit about parameters. It seems like this wouldn't be overrepresented by newlyweds, because I don't mean to condescend, but let's face it, if you're in the first 18 months of a great love affair,
No one wants to listen to you anyway.
no, and you probably don't know yet really what you've stepped into, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really fair assessment.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes
So
perfect sense.
we feel like the average couple that would attend this is going to be married for at least 5 years, and probably the median would be somewhere between 8 and 22.
Yeah, I'm going to think it's going to be easily over 10 years, is my guess.
We feel like this workshop would not be necessarily for someone in the first 3 months of a marriage trauma. My gosh, if you just came home and she or he was in your bed with somebody that wasn't you, and you were still kind of quaking through the trauma of that, if anything close to or actual domestic violence had just occurred in 3 months, we feel like this workshop, you'd need a little more stability to get things out of this workshop.
Makes sense.
I just want to say one thing about that, is not that we would be discriminating against or automatically selecting out. But when you think about it, with regard to who would be the other people in this seminar, I hate to use this because it's such a trope, but it's true, right? There's a lot of triggering events that could possibly happen.
You're going to feel things at this workshop.
And so the thing is to protect those people who are just coming off one of these real sort of cataclysmic events, as well as the other couples who are there who might have already worked through this. So it's trying, really, we're just trying to cradle each group of people in the, for their own needs.
Ryan, would you look at me one more time and say who should come to this workshop?
Steven, who should come to this workshop?
Greedy couples.
There's your cheeky line.
You're right.
My favorite thing these days is like, hey you, I want the two of you to get greedy. I want you to want it all. And so if you're that couple that is just like, I really want to grow love and intimacy across the course of a lifetime, I want to have sex at year 25 that makes what we were doing at year 2 look stupid. I want to have a courtship that just rocks this world. That's what our workshop is for those couples.
One of my I agree with you. And I was just thinking about this today as I was driving over here, and I kind of had to snicker as I was reflecting on our own children. And I thought, and maybe we'll talk about this in the workshop. I would love to try to find a way to professionally work this in. But I always, we look at each other and we laugh and we say, if our children knew everything about us, they would be so embarrassed. And so we've reached this part of our marriage where we're like, yeah, we need to embarrass them. Not that we've ever been arrested. So please understand that this is, again, in the very safe environment of our marriage, right?
Hey, it's Vegas.
So yeah, if you want to embarrass your kids, come on down. We can help you with that.
Well, I really love to, Steven, to your cheeky line, the greedy, because I know this was a word that I really struggled with in our marriage, that we really did a lot of work on with you. And when I think about it too, is that like, I think some of the questions that might come up, first of all, we started with the group experience of the therapy. And while we have the one-on-one now, I find that the both value of having one-on-one time and being in a group of people committed to expanding on their current marriage is such a synergy that is so special that you will not find in many places. And also to have the opportunity to be led by both of you, and with a curriculum that has a very intentional purpose, which is to grow better marriages. And like one of the reasons we started this podcast, I think about this all the time, is like I have really started to step into and embrace that better marriages, better relationships build stronger families. And ultimately, that's what is shaping our future. And so it's like, I look at it as like, we have to do our individual work, but we have to do our work together because our future depends on it. And you two have so many tools that are just not out there. I think even people listening to this conversation, I'm going to guess they're going to see that you're not going to fit that average stigma of your traditional couple therapist. And that's why we were attracted to you, because right away we felt that level of intimacy, and that what you're saying is like only for the brave. The level of courage we tapped into to really take our marriage and continue to work on it, I think it's so appropriately named. And that if someone is listening to this and feeling called to this, that is a sign that you need to pursue that and really go answer that call. And that's where the courage comes in, is to do that, just that. So how do they get in touch with you? How do you want them? We can link the flyer, which looks amazing, in the show notes. How would you want them to pursue? Do they need to get on a call with you first prior to the sign up for the workshop? What's the steps that they need to take if they're interested?
So in the promo materials we sent you, there is an email address.
QR code.
There's a QR code.
There's a link to register.
There's a link to register. If anybody has questions, they are welcome with those materials to get hold of us. We will write you back. We will call you back if we have your phone number, and we can kind of interview you and kind of give you our assessment of your readiness for something like this.
There's also a link to take the Enneagram.
Oh yeah, and there's a link to take the Enneagram test. By the way, the Enneagram Institute is going to charge you $20 a piece to take that test. I swear we're not selling you Tupperware. That's what they charge. That's their money, not ours.
We even had to pay to take the test, so it doesn't matter.
Right. Awesome, you guys. So we just want to close out by saying thank you. You've changed our lives, changed our marriage. You've made a monster impact on our lives, and we love you guys.
Yes, and I am really excited. We'll get part 2 on the books too, because I feel like we just scratched the surface of some of the stuff we wanted to dive into.
We'll do this again.
It's an honor. Thank you for having us.
All right, guys. Take care.
Bye.